Welcome to the Age-Friendly Dayton podcast. This is a program showcasing insights and fascinating stories about the many age-friendly achievements happening in Dayton. Please welcome your host, Age-Friendly Dayton champion Donna Kastner and producer Terry O'Brien.
Well, all right, folks, we're here. This is our very first podcast. Donna, what do you think?
Pretty cool. Dun, 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 dun. We're here.
And tell us, I want you to tell the folks who are joining us for the very first time what this podcast is about. What is Age-Friendly Dayton? Why Dayton? And why is it important now?
Great questions, Terry. Age-Friendly Dayton. You know, there's been a lot of activity in Dayton around age-friendly initiatives. Some of it organic, more of it lately has been very purposeful, driven by organizations like the Dayton Foundation, which I happen to know a lot about because I am a Mar Fellow with the Dayton Foundation.
Okay.
And my initiative that I'm supporting is age-friendly practices, the Miami Valley Age-Friendly Network, and I'm working, stick with this, because it's Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission. So they're an agency that works with the communities throughout our region in assisting with funding for various projects, and age-friendly became a priority for them and as well for the foundation. It was a match made in heaven, and I got to jump in to help advance this.
So tell me a couple of things, because I'm sure they're curious just like I'm curious. How often are these podcasts going up here? Are we doing these monthly, weekly? How often will they show up?
We're gonna go for an every other week pace.
Okay.
For a few months, and then we'll probably take a break. It's gonna be like, I don't know, I'm watching, and tell me, Terry, it's kind of like when I do Netflix and there's a series, you know, the first series will be about 10 episodes.
Okay, and then they can stream it all at home.
They can binge it. They can do
That's right.
Listening parties.
So what is it about aging in Dayton that makes it worth somebody listening to? What are the things we're going to cover over the vast next few weeks? What are we going to talk about?
Okay, Dayton is definitely forward-leaning just on this topic in general, and a lot of the work we're doing is framed by a program within the AARP Livable Communities program. So AARP has a curriculum that's built on 8 domains of livability, okay? And this is to help communities think through, how do we make our communities more livable for older adults and ideally for all generations?
So is this just for people who are running communities, or is this for individuals sitting in their home aging like I am? By the way, I'm 63. And all these questions that are in my mind, I'm sure we're going to address over the time. But so this is just not for community organizers. This is for people who are aging in Dayton.
This is for anyone that cares about these issues, that sees. So right now there is a huge demographic shift that's been predicted for decades, that we currently have a very top-heavy, age-wise population.
So they're waiting for us to die.
Those boomers, they've changed every single life stage they've moved through, and this is not going to be an exception. But you might have heard 2034, for the first time in U.S. history, there'll be more people 65 and older than 18 and younger. And that has great strains on a community, even from a resource, transportation, housing.
Right.
There's just so many different dynamics that come into play. So right now, through this program, we're trying to get communities to think, what do you need now?
What do they need to provide we won't call it elderly, because I'm probably there now, the people who are aging.
Yeah, I'm a couple of years ahead of you. So,
okay, you know better than I do.
And when people say things like frail and elderly or senior citizen, it's like, I don't know if some of us are in denial, but we kind of look and say, hang on, not yet.
So just real quick, in this podcast, we're going to kind of have 3 different blocks, right? We're going to do a little opener where we talk about things that are going on. Then you're going to talk something about hot topics. That'll be another block of information.
Yeah, it seems like regularly each month I'm stumbling across great stories, insights, research. So the hot topics will be quick, 3 things people might want to know that care about this. And let me go back to who's this podcast best for.
Please do.
It's best for civic leaders, so the community leaders.
Right.
It's also good for nonprofits and for-profits that are serving the age 60 plus population to kind of better understand dynamics. And we'll talk, national trends, but we'll often go micro on Greater Dayton.
Got it.
Okay? And it's also great for the individuals themselves to understand. We'll talk about things like, how to age gracefully, happily, healthy. What kind of things can you do now to help improve your chances of aging in place and in a good way? I know it's a desire for many of us.
So there may be terms or acronyms that we'll throw out there. It would be great at the time when we come across those. Let's explain what that acronym is. Aging in place, right? That means staying in your home as long as possible, correct?
Correct. And by the way, I'm going to count on you, Terry, to be the acronym police, because sometimes I'll go sailing through and you got to stop me.
Well, you folks are in for a problem there.
So you have to pull me over. And by the way, aging in place.
Yeah.
80-90% of people age 65 and older, that is their desire. The likelihood of that happening is good.
Right.
But most homes are not situated for that outcome as we move into our 80s and 90s.
Right.
And so some of the discussions that we're sparking is like, I know you don't need it now, but what small steps can you do now to make that aging in place
So when we give
likely?
people like information about, okay, let's say they need a stair lift, are we going to be talking to stair lift providers about what that costs? Are we going to be digging into things like that?
We might not get that granular, but I don't want to exclude anything. And if a stair lifter person comes up to me and wants to tell me a story and it's relevant and of value to our audience, we're going there. I think like understanding home improvements you can make right now that will be valued by others. I think it might be topics like how to downsize, all that stuff you were saving for your kids and they kind of don't want it. And now you got to figure out what to do with it.
Oh, my kids want it. And they want it now. All right, so why don't we, then the next things we're going to do, we're going to create these blocks, right? The intro block, which we just did. Then we're going to have a block of hot topics. So is it possible that we can just jump into those hot topics and talk, or have we covered enough on the intro to tell people what this is about?
I think that's the start, and folks, bear with us because I think we're going to be having this conversation through each episode. We'll go a step further. But Terry, you're the producer, and I do believe it's time.
Let's do it. Let's have the hot topics of this week. What are they, Donna?
All right, ready?
I'm
Buckle
ready.
up. Hot topic number 1. Are you ready for the 60-year career? Yikes.
What the heck's that? I'm sorry.
So we knew, 40, 45 years, maybe even 50, but now the 60-year career experts are saying that this will become mainstream. There was a podcast I caught recently from the Wall Street Journal where they had various experts talking about, we're living healthier lives.
Right.
So if we're going to live to 100, stopping, with a 40-year career, we're likely going to go 10 or 20 years longer, most, and there are exceptions, but these are trends. And what was interesting to me in this discussion was that, first of all, the people most impacted by this will be those that are entering the workforce right now.
You mean the college grads, the people graduating high school?
Correct.
People are entering in and looking for a real job.
Gen Z. I believe that's Gen Z. It's coming out of college and moving into the workforce, and so they're the youngest in the workforce, and they're likely to have a 60-year span, but it may not be the same. In fact, it's not going to be what we knew. There'll be times where there's highs and lows, and in fact, so Laura Carstensen, she's an amazing woman, founding director of the Stanford Center on Longevity. Oh. And she suggests that, in the past, we kind of parsed our lives out in thirds. First, you learned, your education happened. Then you earned, you had your career years. And then you retired. And if you were lucky, maybe you had 10 years or more of that last part. So this longevity gift is kind of teeing up new things. And she suggests instead of, a better way, knowing that this is coming, is weaving education, leisure, and work throughout our entire life. So think about it. I don't know about you, but especially I can think of my 40s, all three of our sons, full throttle.
Right.
My husband and I were headed in different directions every day. There's a lot of stressors going on. Wouldn't it be nice if that person had a chance to maybe dial back to 30 or 25 hours, while they're at full throttle? Then as things ease up, they'll scale back in as they're preparing for retirement. These are the kinds of scenarios that people are thinking about.
So you're saying, make sure I understand this. You're saying somebody in their 40s who are raising kids, and it is hard because you got so many things going on.
Yeah.
You're saying maybe the lifestyle will be in the future. They don't work 40, 50 hours a week like I had to climb the ladder.
Right.
They scale back to help raise their kids, and then once their kids are at a point where they're self-sufficient, they can put on the gas again.
Correct.
Okay.
And by the way, there'll be the early, there's certain things that won't change. And again, we're just looking out, gazing into the future. But what Dr. Carstensen suggests, that we start to weave this together, that there's highs and lows. You're going to see, maybe people will take sabbaticals for a few months and go out and upskill. I mean, they might go on a trip and learn new skills and come back.
Right.
Or they might go on a sabbatical completely leisure. Get ready, because youngest in the workforce, you're going to help us architect some new thoughts around work.
All right, so what is hot topic number 2?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Hot topic number 2. It's the new age of aging. It's a landmark study by one of my favorite experts in this field, Dr. Ken Dykewald, founder of Age-Wave.
Oh, I have all of his albums.
Not that. But he is a noted expert, gerontologist. He's a speaker at conferences. He's amazing. All kinds of great books. He's been studying this market. They call it the maturing population market for nearly 40 years. And he just did a study that was released just a month ago, and he talked about, he surveyed 2,000 adults. About better than half of them were 50 and older, so it was a multi-generational group.
Right.
And they started to just kind of understand a few things, asking them some questions of their perceptions of aging. Definition of old. When does old start, Terry?
As a teenager, old was about 25.
Yeah.
And then as I got
Never
to be
trust
25,
anyone over 30.
It was 40.
Okay.
And when you got to 40, it was 55. So it goes up by 15 years from where you are at the current point.
Pretty darn good. So what their observations were, so for our parents and grandparents and their time in general, they would define old as starting kind of in your 60s. Today, let's push that up 20 years, 80. Think of Mick Jagger. I just saw him on that
he's
interview.
fantastic.
Yeah, we've got some people out there that are modeling a whole new
Paul
path.
McCartney, Mick Jagger, yeah.
Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin. There are people out there modeling new ways to age. By the way, Tom Cruise, do you know he did stunts, most of his stunts, and he's 61.
I'm 63, and by the way, I look a lot like Tom Cruise. And I do all my own bathroom breaks, so if he's doing all of his own stunts, I'm meeting him halfway there.
But one more quick thought, because this Age-Wave study is amazing, and it's free, by the way. Google Age-Wave, or we'll have a link in the show notes. But get this, 71% of today's modern elders, which we kind of term as age 60 plus, say that the best time of their lives is right now or in front of them. It's yet to come.
I would believe that. Yeah, I think that's probably true.
So sometimes we talk about, looking at this, longevity, we look at aging, and it's like, oh. And there's some opportunities in front of us, and we are going to chart a new course, I have no doubt.
Well, it's a thing like we refer to, I run a nostalgia page for our city, right? And people always love to look back, how things were back in the 70s or back in the 60s.
The Wayback Machine.
They think it was better, and sometimes maybe it was, but I think it's just they have fond memories, and they really don't understand they're living in a nostalgic point right now for 20 years later.
I agree. I'm going to tuck in one last observation. You see all those anti-aging. I got to be youthful.
Oh, yeah.
Well, 83% of adults in this demographic, this age 65 demographic, say it is more important to feel useful than youthful.
Okay. So say that again.
Useful. To be of use. To have a purpose and a meaning. To wake up in the morning and be, a support for someone. Do something important, helpful, whatever it is. Everyone defines that differently. But I found this study so encouraging, and I don't think it's like, starry-eyed, rose-colored glasses. I do know Age-Wave looks at this hard. Actually, they worked with Edward Jones. It was in conjunction with Edward Jones where they started to understand this new age of aging. So that was one hot topic. But I got one more.
We got one more hot topic. Give me the last one here, number 3. What is it?
Currently streaming on Netflix, Life to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones.
I've seen part of that.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, it actually it is amazing to see these folks, how they're in different areas, different geographic areas of the country, who live longer.
So for those of you that haven't seen this, it's a 4-part series. If you have access to Netflix, I highly recommend it. Dan Buttner, the explorer, he's a best-selling author. I've seen his books, but I think the series takes it a step further. And you're saying they studied people that, areas where more people were living to 100. There were more centenarians. And they called out Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Icaria, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. Those were specific regions.
And they call them blue zones.
They're blue zones. And, I think just to cap this off, there's so much to see in this. So you can go rent it from the library, watch it on Netflix, whatever you need to do. But they identified 4 principles driving this longevity. 1, eating wisely. 2, moving naturally.
And that means just getting up and moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to have 17 different pieces of equipment, move naturally. 3, connecting with others. Think about coming out of the pandemic. The isolation was definitely hardest on older adults. And 4, and I think this is huge, having a purpose.
No, I think that is actually the most important one, because if you feel like you got a reason to get up and do something, it gives your life a lot more meaning.
Completely agree. And I'm now looking at the clock, and I think we are ready to move on. But we're going to take a quick break. Before we move on, we're going to be talking to Leigh Sempeles with the Dayton Foundation. So stick around, because that's our next fascinating Age-Friendly Dayton conversation.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Thanks to the Mar Encore Fellows initiative at the Dayton Foundation for making this Age-Friendly Dayton podcast possible. Since 2017, the Dayton Foundation has deployed numerous highly skilled older adults into the community to work as Mar Encore Fellows to help communities solve problems and create new opportunities. Thank you again to the Dayton Foundation for making this Age-Friendly Dayton podcast possible.
All right, well, welcome back to our guest segment. Donna, tell us who we got today.
Oh boy, Terry, I'm thrilled with who we have today. We have Leigh Sempeles, who is Senior Fellow at the Dayton Foundation, joining us. She leads this fellowship program that we're talking about today. And she kind of blazes a trail for fellows like me. Leigh, we're thrilled to have you. Welcome.
Hi, Leigh.
Thank you both. As we all know, we're an aging population. Nearly 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every day. Very well aware of this fact was a generous donor, Don Ambrose, who came to the Dayton Foundation 10 years ago. And his passion was to support older adults in the workforce, and also to be mindful of creating age-friendly communities for our aging population. So he walked in the door, and we started an initiative called the Mar Encore Fellow Initiative in 2016. It started as a 3-year pilot. There was approximately $1 million invested in the Del Mar Healthcare Fund to start this Encore Fellowship program, and it was modeled after a national Encore Fellow program that we were witnessing that was happening across the country. Since 2016, we have employed more than 15 fellows who are working with nonprofits in our community, and they work on what I would call significant community issues. They're placed there for 1 year. The Dayton Foundation provides all the infrastructure for the fellowship to happen. So the fellows are paid a stipend. They receive an expense budget on behalf of the work they should do for their host organization. And the Dayton Foundation provides leadership for the program with a senior fellow. So since 2016, as I've mentioned, last year we did an evaluation of the Del Mar Encore Fellow initiative at the Dayton Foundation. and it's been highly successful and can truly be replicated across the country. I get questions all the time from different foundations, different organizations. Leigh, how could we get started with this Encore Fellow initiative as the Dayton Foundation has done? We looked at the hours that the fellows have contributed to the community in terms of volunteer hours. There has been more than 30,000 hours. And if you put a price tag on that, we are contributing more than $2.1 million to the Dayton economy.
Gotta love that.
Who doesn't love money?
And there's so much to unpack here. I mean, to me, I was kind of watching from afar, and then one day I became a fellow, and there's just so much going on. And here it's an innovative concept that really started here, hence Age-Friendly Dayton. It's to me a very age-friendly initiative that taps expertise that has not been largely tapped in this way. Would you agree?
Totally agree. And what it provides for the host organization is highly educated, 40-year career professionals to come into an organization and give a quality work product and serve in a role that perhaps these nonprofit organizations could not fill. So part of the evaluation, we also looked at what's the value of a fellow coming into a nonprofit and serving in a strategic position. And if these nonprofits would have to go out and hire a consultant, we valued it at to the tune of $155,000 a year. So they are receiving a lot in terms of the fellow. There's also other benefits, like the fellow, they serve as mentors to the executive directors. We all know it's lonely at the top. I've served in one of those roles. And also for the fellows, this is a way that they can build their Encore career and the way for them to fulfill their sense of purpose in their retirement years.
Oh, I love the term Encore career. I love that.
It's an exciting Encore chapter that's now getting longer thanks to what? The gift of longevity, right?
Yes.
So can you tell us, you mentioned the report and the assessment for the programming, and applause to everyone. There's many hands involved in developing this program. Tell us more about the impact, I'm thinking, in the community. I think those stories that are happening, how organizations are benefiting.
Right. Some of our fellows have worked on really interesting projects. So, for example, we had a fellow at St. Mary's Development Corporation. St. Mary's in our community provides senior housing. And the fellow went in and studied the use of technology for older adults. So they placed Amazon Echoes within each apartment for each older adult. That way they could be reminded about what time to take their medicine, or perhaps participate in telehealth opportunities, which has so much grown since the pandemic. And also it was a way to combat social isolation and loneliness, which is truly an epidemic amongst our older adults in our country right now.
And that initiative happened actually before the pandemic. Thankfully, that technology was in place to help those older adults navigate through the pandemic and stay connected, right?
That was exactly right, Donna. And then another fellow who's a current fellow working at Miami Valley Housing Opportunities, what she is studying is the use of different types of housing, this concept of tiny homes, accessory dwelling units, and how those can be built within the Dayton community to help more vulnerable populations, in addition to homeless men, women, and children. So her use and her research into this affordable housing and safe housing, new concepts that are happening across the country, just not in our area, that is now being embraced by the city of Dayton, and we're actually looking for land to begin to build some of these tiny homes.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. Leigh, let me ask a real quick question. If I was a fellow, right, would I be assigned to only one potential client, or am I given to multiple clients?
That's a great question. At this point in time, the way the fellowships work, you are assigned to one host organization.
Okay.
Or, as we're sort of revising the Fellows program, the Dayton Foundation is so committed, and the governing board believes in this initiative, that there's actual funding coming, not just from our donor, but also our grants committee at the foundation, and we're working on special projects that the Dayton Foundation wants to do a deep dive in. So again, that could be something like working on traumatic brain injury resources in our community, working with UD. So there is one fellow per one, what I call a host organization.
And I have to tell you, Terry, so Leigh convenes a fellows meeting a couple times a month. Right now there's currently 10 of us. That conversation is the highlight of my month. We're each sharing stories about, advancements that we're making, but also reaching out, kind of, hey, here's a challenge I'm facing, any suggestions, and helping one another. It's fascinating.
That would be fascinating. Actually, it'd be fun to sit in and listen to that, because there's probably so much brain power in that room, sharing ideas and thoughts, that I think capturing that would be
And fellowship brilliant. Is a proper word, because as much as the brain power and the work being done is important,
right,
there is, connection, friendships. It is a true fellowship.
Okay.
That was the unexpected bonus, that now I'm part of something larger, but I care about my fellow fellows. If I spot something or someone needs help, I don't know, it's just a new group I'm a part of, and I belong.
So to be a fellow, or to have a fellow assigned to me, do I have to be a nonprofit, Leigh?
Correct.
So I have to be a nonprofit group in the area. And the area is what's the area that you cover?
The area we cover the entire region, I would say. We actually had a fellow as far as Yellow Springs, Ohio, and also in Miami County. The way the nonprofit cycle works is each spring we put out a competitive RFP process for nonprofits. I send it to more than 200 different nonprofits in our region, and they submit and complete an application for a fellowship for a 1-year term.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic.
Leigh, I've been watching you. We were colleagues, and now you're leading the program, and I've been so curious and fascinated, and I've learned so much from you. And as I look at your career path, lifelong, many of the things you've done before have contributed to this role you have now and your mastery. Tell us more about your background that made this appealing for you.
My career has been in both the private corporate sector as well as what I would call the social services nonprofit sector. I'm trained as a lawyer, but I spent more than 23 years at LexisNexis in product development and also strategic role positions. After I left LexisNexis, I went to the nonprofit sector, where I was executive director at St. Vincent de Paul in the Dayton community. And then as I moved to the East Coast, I was also the executive director of the Foggy Bottom West End Village in the D.C. area. At Foggy Bottom and working through the village movement is where I became more of an expert in aging services. The village movement helps older adults stay in their own homes and communities for the long term. When AARP does studies on how people want to age, more than 90% of people all say they want to age in place. And so that experience sort of led me to this role in terms of working on age-friendly initiatives, working with the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission's Institute for Livable and Equitable Communities, and now as a senior fellow. I want to continue doing this work. I want to combat ageism as it exists in the workplace and in social settings, and also change the narrative around aging. And that is what the Encore Fellows are really all about as well. We're here to show what older adults bring not only to the workplace, but also in service to their communities.
Awesome. Hey, looking ahead, what's coming next? Where are we heading with the program?
As I mentioned briefly, we are now being funded through our donor fund, but also by the Dayton Foundation to work on more specific initiatives. So we'll be doing more of those in future years. We're also looking at hosting peer organizations that have fellows to come in and share best practices, get more involved with community initiatives, and we're also looking at setting up an advisory council. Perhaps this might be former fellows who are now alum who want to continue giving back to their community and helping us, and also engaging other older adults in volunteering.
I do have one question before we wrap this segment up. Leigh, what do you look for in a fellow?
What we're looking for in a fellow, typically fellows are age 55 and older. They're retired, but their backgrounds come from all different disciplines. So we have engineers, we have educators, we have former government professionals, healthcare workers. I mentioned prior that we had a fellow who has historic preservation in housing experience. We also had a fellow who was a filmmaker, and he did a fellowship where he created videos and podcasts centered around aging. So we look for a fellow who is passionate about doing this work, serving their community, and lending their 40-year plus work experience to their host organization.
Fantastic. Well, I tell you what, I learned a lot. This has been great.
Yeah, me too, and I'm in the program. So Leigh, if someone's tuning in, whether they're an individual, part of the age 60 plus population, looking at becoming maybe a fellow or maybe a host organization, what next steps would you suggest they take?
I would first go to the Dayton Foundation website. We're revamping it. It's really great, and you'll find the Mar Encore Fellow initiative highly placed on the website, and there'll be a link that would connect to myself, or just call the Dayton Foundation, and they will put you through to myself, and I can share more about the program.
Wonderful, and we'll have Leigh's contact info in our show notes too.
Absolutely.
Great. Leigh, thank you so much. This has been wonderful, and thanks for your leadership in this program. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leigh. All right, Donna, wasn't Leigh fantastic?
Oh, I have to say yes. Well, of course, she's my boss, too, over at the foundation.
She's your boss. Well, then you got to be extra nice to her.
But she's fantastic. I'm telling you, her depth of knowledge around this whole topic is amazing.
And so let me ask you this question. What is going to be on our next podcast?
You know, I can just kind of tease it out with two words. Doable change.
Doable change.
I think about this, we are in mid-course corrections on retirement, and we got to be more comfortable with easy, achievable, doable change.
Now, you know what I felt like right there? This was a throwback real quick, but Ed McMahon and Johnny Carson would do this thing where you say doable change. Go ahead.
Doable change.
Doable change. And Johnny would look at Ed like, okay, you're an idiot, right? So I feel like I'm Ed McMahon in this.
Did he do the Carnac
Yeah, the Carnac thing. Yeah. So people out there who are listening will probably understand what we're talking about.
Another boomer reference. Sorry.
All right. So great first podcast. We will be back again soon. So Donna, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Terry, thank you for guiding us, steering us here on the podcast.
Happy to do it. All right, folks. We'll see you again real soon.